Hi, Brianne, David.
Hello.
Hello, hello. All right, there's a question board. I'm just popping this into the chat. There's a question board if you guys want to log into that and drop any questions or upvote any existing questions. That makes it much more efficient to make sure that we're covering the topics that folks want to talk about. And we'll give folks a minute here. And while we're waiting, I'll do a little bit of talking. Um, Hello, everybody. Hi, Marilyn. Okay. My name's Eric. I am a recruiter. I've been recruiting for the past 10 years. In a prior life, I was doing software product development, product management, and I've been part of the NSA, the Never Search Alone community now for going on 9 months as a moderator of two JSCs. And I know that one of the big challenges is, as part of the process, is connecting with a recruiter. And so I've been doing this coffee with a recruiter thing now for the past few weeks, really with the premise of trying to sort of shine the light on what recruiting is and sort of that whole black box of the recruiting process and everything behind the scenes, with the premise that a little bit of information can go a long way with respect to helping you as job seekers just navigate that whole job search and interview process, right? And so that's sort of the whole spirit of what we're doing here today. Typically do this every week, every Thursday at 3 o'clock Mountain Time. And I usually allocate about 30 minutes to just touch on any questions that are top of mind. I know that the NSA is doing something similar in parallel, which is fine too. Um, and hopefully, you guys are joining that as well and sort of getting some value out of that. So without further ado, I'm going to pop this again into the chat because I know people that are joining are not able to see previous chats from what I understand. I want to make sure that you guys have a link to that. So go to onlinequestions.org, type in that code there, and then there's a question board where you can either upvote questions or you drop anything that's top of mind. And I will be monitoring that, and we can go from there. And again, really, I don't really prepare for these. It's really sort of led by you guys and sort of addressing sort of nuanced situations that you might be dealing with, or just, general questions that you might have. Again, the spirit is to try to shed some light on what a recruiter's perspective looks like, what the, again, that black box of an interview process looks like, and, ultimately to help you manage your expectations with respect to the job search process and just to navigate the whole thing more effectively. So, okay, that's all I've got as far as an introduction. Oh, I do have let's see. I typically have a little poll, and I'll send this in the I'll launch this here, and you guys could do this in your own time if you're interested, or if you find you're getting bored in this call. It's just for me to kind of get a little bit more information about keeping my finger on the pulse of what's going on out there in sort of the job search um, landscape, I guess. Okay. Um, does anyone have any questions they want to sort of share? Otherwise, I'll just go on the board here and sort of just pick from the top. Okay. So I'm in the board here. We have one that's upvoted 5 times. How can we get feedback from the interview with the hiring manager? I mean, you can just ask directly. I think a lot of folks ask for feedback after the fact. And sometimes people just don't get around to it, or they don't remember, or they're just, they start thinking about sort of, CYA. So I think the best time to get feedback is right then and there. And I think part of it is just asking, demonstrating that you are receptive to feedback, and really, that if they're able to provide you feedback, that you will take that wholeheartedly and use that to sort of improve, your whole job search and how you navigate your job search and your career. Um, obviously, I mean, not obviously, but a lot of hiring managers, a lot of recruiters shy away from giving feedback out of concern for whatever, the backlash or legal exposure or whatnot. And that's a real thing. And so you have to be sensitive to that. But if you could build a rapport with the interviewer, the recruiter, hiring manager, and you can ask them then and there for feedback and be specific about what feedback that you're looking for, right? You could ask questions like, where do you feel like my candidacy is strongest here, or where do you feel like I might be missing the mark, or where do you feel like I might be, not as strong potentially as other candidates in your consideration? Um, and you could ask those kinds of feedback directly, and I would recommend doing it within the interview if you can sort of manage to make time for that. Who asked that question, by the way? Is there any sort of clarifying questions or nuance you want to add to this? No? Okay. Um, how do you sort through the millions of resumes you receive for a job opening? Yeah, that's a real problem nowadays. 2 years ago, that wasn't as much of a problem, and it's sort of a trend now where job openings are getting something in the order of, on average, 270-ish applicants or resumes for a given job posting. And that number is up, I think. I saw a stat the other day that it was up by it was up from like 150 from about a year ago. And I think part of that is attributed to maybe some of these AI spam bots or whatever, and just how easy it is to apply and for anybody to apply with whatever, one click apply, easy apply, whatever. And so it's a problem for candidates. It's a problem for the employers because they're getting inundated. But typically, the way it works is you'll have multiple tiers. So if you have a lot of these resumes go into an ATS system, an applicant tracking system. And what ends up happening is you have a recruiter, typically a recruiter is working on multiple requisitions or job openings, and they'll cycle through their stack, right? And when they cycle through their stack, a lot of times in these ATS, it gives an easy way to just click through. So you can also imagine swipe left, swipe right. You're clicking through the person's profile, and it's showing. It often has some information about the candidate or applicant, but then it has a view of their resume, right? And so nobody's printing out resumes. They're having a view of their resume, typically in the ATS system, and that's scrollable. So don't be too concerned about, oh, I have, a 3-page resume. It's not too big of a deal. And they're clicking through the resumes, and oftentimes that first pass of going from 278 down to something that's more manageable, the recruiter's looking at it through a mindset of any reason, just looking for any reason to disqualify you. Typo, you don't live in the state, whatever, right? They're looking for any reason to disqualify you. And so that's usually the mindset for the first pass. They're looking for any reason to disqualify you. And then they start thinking more, once they have it down from 278 down to something more manageable, let's say 40 candidates, then they'll start doing another pass where they'll look at you through a different lens of, what is this person's strong suits, right, and so forth. But that's typically how a recruiter would go through and sort of get through the millions of resumes out there. And if anyone asked this question, just chime in. I saw a hand raised here. Marilyn, did you have a question? Was this your question?
Thanks for hosting this. Yeah, I'm curious,
sure.
Piggybacking on this, the millions of resumes, what's your take on the ATS and whether the ATS filters out for you, or, the on the flip side of the coin, I've heard conflicting things that, a human always reviews. And then the ATS is something more of like the recruiter's content management system, but a human is placed into that. It's like, the widest part of the funnel. But what's your take? Does AI eliminate you based on your resume, or?
I would say for the most part, no. There's a lot of concern, especially with the big ATS systems, about using AI to evaluate a candidate. A lot of ATS systems are steering clear of that. They don't want to be known for a robot evaluating a human being, right? So the way they're spinning it, or sort of messaging it, is a lot of them are saying, hey, we can help you sort, and we can give you the information you need as a human being to more effectively evaluate, sort of the human in the loop, right? And so based on what I've seen, particularly with the bigger ATS systems out there, is they're steering clear of the AI doing the work of 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 screening out people. Um, but it's also kind of blurry, right? Because if they're stack ranking everybody, and they're making some people more accessible to the hiring man, to the human, and some people less accessible, although they're still accessible, is that screening people out? Maybe. But there's also, so that's on one end of the spectrum when you look at some of the incumbent large ATS systems out there and some of the things that they're worried about or they're concerned about. But then on the other end of the spectrum, with respect to, I mean, there's a million different tools that are just popping up, right? And so I'm almost guaranteed you could find tools out there that are scoring candidates, like literally scoring them, or you give it a stack and it's eliminating them, right? They're just, they're almost no longer accessible to the human anymore, right? And so those things will exist as well. So
Do you think
I hope that,
is it still worth tailoring? I've heard, again, conflicting information about whether it is worth spending the time to tailor your resume to each role or not, based on,
yeah,
that sort of,
that's a good question.
yeah,
That's
is
a good
that
question. I mean,
time well spent, I guess, is the question.
yeah, that's what it comes down to, right? It's sort of effective use of your time, right? Because you could spend, you could spend all your, half of your time just optimizing your resume for a particular job, or based on keywords or something like that, right? But with respect to customizing your resume, I would definitely customize your resume. But what I like to tell folks is have a section on top, which is, you can call it your objective or whatever. And that's where you put your candidate market fit statement. But that's also where you highlight, that's the area where you would customize. And the rest of your resume, assuming your candidate market fit is fairly narrow, as it should be, and you're not applying to software engineering jobs as well as a designer job as well as a welding job, right? Like that's clearly, you're going to have different resumes if you're doing that all together, right? But if you're just, for example, applying to software engineering jobs, right, the rest of your resume should be fairly static. But the objective section is the part that lends itself really well to customization, just from a maintenance standpoint, but also from a reader standpoint, right? Because that's mostly where recruiters or the audience is going to start, is at the top. So what I do when I'm looking at a resume, I'm looking at the name, looking at the state, or where the person resides if they have that on their resume. But then I'm looking at that objective section, and what I'd like to see is that kind of market fit statement. What is this person looking for, right? And then you can have a few bullets after that, sort of highlighting maybe your marquee accomplishments, right? And that's really, that whole section is the hook. And then the rest of your stuff could be, I would argue, could be pretty static, assuming that you're fairly narrow in the jobs that you're going after, jobs or positions that you're going after. Does that help, Marilyn?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Okay, cool. Let's see. Are posted salary ranges fixed, or can they be negotiated above that range? Yeah, so typically the way it works, and just so you guys know, most of my background is working with venture capital backed startups or growth companies. So mostly tech, right? These are mostly tech enabled companies that are VC backable. But from my experience, from what I've seen is, yes, it can be negotiated. Right now, we're in sort of a unique situation where there's an abundance of great talent out there. So the leverage has shifted from 2 years ago more towards the employer. And so I would say that there's probably less leverage now on the part of a job seeker to really negotiate. Now, that doesn't mean it's impossible, but there's a bit more of a headwind than there was compared to maybe 2 years ago. Um, and for you to negotiate above a salary range, there's also headwinds internally. So even if the hiring manager is sold on you and they want to sort of advocate, they really want to, close you as a candidate, you have to think about what layers that they need to go through, because this might already be finalized with finance, and if they're already outside of their budget, they have to escalate that to finance, and somebody in finance needs to get approval from this person or that person. And so even if that person, it's sort of like an enterprise sale, right? You have to sort of navigate the bureaucracy of who needs to sign off on it, right? So if the hiring manager has buffer in their budget for this role that maybe you're not aware of, then you might be able to take advantage of that. But if they don't have room in their budget and they need to escalate it to finance or something, then it might be an uphill battle. But it doesn't hurt to try, right? And so, yeah. So I'm just going to keep moving along, just in the interest of sort of getting some breath. If you guys want to go deeper on any of these, just chime in and we'll try to go deeper on it. So let's see. So the next one is, should I ask the recruiter to provide feedback and updates for the role up front? I seem to think this is an expectation, but many third-party recruiters never follow up until I send them an email. Should I ask the recruiter to provide feedback and updates for the role up front? Yeah, if you set the stage with the recruiter that, look, I'm really interested in, improving my candidacy, or just, even how I go to market with the whole job search process, I would appreciate any kind of feedback, and sort of set the stage with that and sort of build that rapport with the recruiter. Make it safe for the recruiter to provide you feedback. So, yeah, if you sort of demonstrate that, then I would see that the recruiter would be much more apt or much more open to providing you with meaningful feedback. And just so you know, like, the recruiters right now they're really slammed. Oftentimes companies are slimming down their internal recruiting team, and so you might have a recruiter that's handling the work of multiple recruiters, and so for them to proactively think about feedback that they could provide to you, where there isn't as much incentive for them to do that. That's why it's rare that recruiters will push information to you in the way of feedback. It's rare, right? And so, it also might expose them, right? We kind of touched on that earlier. It might expose them from a legal standpoint, or just backlash or whatever, right? So, the request really has to come from you as a candidate. Can you recommend any strategies to stand out when applying for a role? I have a good one. At least I think it's good. It worked for one of the members in my JSC a few months back, because not everybody's going to do this. So when you apply for a job and you're sending your resume in, you're basically subjecting yourself to their process, right? However they define that process. And I had this idea that, what if you put a QR code on your resume, and that QR code went to a video of you introducing yourself? What if you did that, right? You'd effectively be hijacking their process, right? Your resume goes in, it comes across their desk, they see a QR code, they bring their phone up to it, and boom, now you're on their phone talking to them. It's a bit of a hack, a one-way interview that you're sort of pushing onto them, but it can very quickly give you the ability to get in front of someone and sort of pitch yourself, or just give them a sense that there's a human being behind this resume. So it's a hack. Nobody does this. So if you were to do it, yeah, if I saw a QR code that was presented well on a resume, I would be very interested and curious to be like, what is this? Boom, right? And so you can also start collecting data on sort of the reach that you're getting with, I don't know, a Bitly link or something like that. Something to consider, right? You got to look at what people are not doing and what are ways that you could stand out. There's a million ideas out there. It's really will you take the time to do it, or will you do it, right? um, okay, how important or valuable do you think it is to find a recruiter to partner with on your job hunt? Curious about metrics and how much energy I should be focusing on getting the attention of a recruiter in an attempt to partner. Um, so it's funny because the market, sort of the job market, kind of oscillates, right? And I keep alluding to this, but like 2 years ago, it was very much a candidates market, particularly in tech, and now it's sort of the pendulum swung the other way. And so, back then, it was me knocking on everybody's door. Hey, would you talk to me? Would you talk to me? And now it's kind of swung the other way. And I think that, if ever you get a recruiter reaching out to you, what I would recommend is, and I'm not just going to say, oh, just take the call, get a sense of who they are, but just take a peek at their LinkedIn profile. And you kind of can stratify the recruiter based on kind of how long they've been in the business. Are they a senior recruiter? Are they did they just get out of school? Are they working in a particular industry that aligns with you or your career, right? And if they sort of meet that sort of pre-screening on your part, I would recommend taking a call with them, even if you're not actively looking, and start to build that relationship with them, right? Because recruiters, they could be a good source of they're sort of surveying the talent market as well as the employer market. And so they can give you information probably pretty quickly if you start asking questions and sort of engaging at that level. And then also thinking about ways that you can add value for them, right? A lot of internal recruiters are, they're interested in obviously finding candidates for the roles. External recruiters, third-party recruiters, agency recruiters, they're interested in, building their talent pipelines, but they're also interested in a platform because a lot of them are, trying to solicit new clients or, and so there's differences between internal and external recruiters, and sort of the economic incentives are different. So just being sensitive to that as well. But going back to the question, I think it is valuable to develop relationships with recruiters, the right recruiters. Um, even before you're sort of actively looking. Um, okay, I'm gonna keep moving on here.
Can I, Eric,
Um,
you skipped
yeah,
one. You actually skipped one that's mine. I think it moved while you were going about the emailing
which
the
one?
hunter and recruiter directly, like the top corner.
Oh, yeah, I see it. Okay. Oh, sorry about that.
That's okay. I just
Um,
mine, so wanted it.
okay, yeah, no, totally. Was that Brienne?
Yeah, yeah, that's Brian.
Okay, okay, perfect. Okay, so what do you think about cover letters emailing the hiring manager or recruiter directly, especially if they aren't listed, but you guess them from LinkedIn? Yeah. So first off, I would definitely recommend applying. That's what I call the front door. But then going through the side door or the back door, I think is what this is suggesting or asking about. And I highly recommend this, right? Nobody's going to do this for you. You have to be your own recruiter nowadays. And so to the extent that you can go to the back door or front door, every side door by trying to connect with the hiring manager or recruiter, I think could be sort of a valuable channel or pathway. And then just some thoughts about how you do that. Most recruiters are on LinkedIn. Most hiring managers are on LinkedIn, particularly in tech. I Most recruiters tend to be more active on LinkedIn, whereas hiring managers maybe a bit less so. They're busy doing their job, and sometimes a lot of times their job is not on LinkedIn. But when you think about why a hiring manager would be on LinkedIn, either they're trying to source themselves, so they'll advertise the role that they're hiring for, or they just want to be thought of as sort of a thought leader in their space, right? And so maybe they're trying to build out their own personal brand. So one sort of technique to get on the radar of a hiring manager is to start engaging with their content, right? And that's a very easy way for them to get some name recognition with them, so that when you do reach out to them, it's not entirely cold, right? You can even establish a dialogue with hiring managers or recruiters around certain posts or content that they might be either creating or engaging with. And so that's a great way, a highly underutilized way for getting on people's radar. So I would suggest that versus the cold connection request. But yeah,
guess,
I think
like what I have seen is sometimes in the job description, it will say like this role will be reporting to, and then it has the title of someone.
yeah.
And if I can find, they don't always have the exact title, but if I can find it, I have an email service that generally provides me with everyone's work email. And so then
Yeah.
I just send them an email and I'm like, hey, it looks like you're the hiring manager for this role. And then like, here's some reasons why I'm interested. But I just wonder, like, is that annoying or do people expect that? Like, is that pretty normal?
So from the hiring manager and recruiter perspective, particularly right now, they are getting inundated with applications. So I talked to a friend of mine who's a hiring manager right now last week, and he was telling me, man, I have a stack of like 300 something resumes, and he's like, my recruiter can't even get to it. And so what is he resorting to? He's resorting to his own personal network or people that are referring people to him. And now, in that example, right? If you were to email him, chances are he would welcome that, right? Because you're doing something that other people aren't doing, and these other people are just sitting in this giant stack, which is super overwhelming to him and his recruiter. And they're kind of they're picking away at it. But if you were to proactively reach out to him, you would be top of mind. I mean, he wants to hire for the position, right? And there's a lot of hiring managers, they got budget allocated, they have a role, they need help on their team. There's a reason why it's open. They want to hire for it. But there's a lot of things like, again, you have a job requisition that, the funnel's getting plugged up because there's just too many people. And so if you can sort of slip around the side or the backside, you should do it. I mean, that's my take on it. Obviously, you don't want to be annoying or pestering, and so I came across this term the other day with respect to like drip campaigns, exponential back off, right? And so you email someone, okay, when do you follow up? Maybe you follow up in a week. Okay, follow up in a week. And you don't hear from them again. Do you follow up in another week? Maybe, or maybe it's 10 days, right? Or, but if you're just emailing them every day, that I'll guarantee that's going to be annoying. Or when they finally get to your email and they see that, whoa, this person emailed me every day for the past 10 days, they're going to think, oh, there's something wrong with this person, right? So you just have to, use your best judgment in terms of how you reach out.
Can I ask a follow-up to that? I've used that strategy, and I just assuming that at the very least they'll take a look because it's in their, it's
Yeah.
they'll do a deeper dive, a slightly deeper, or at least you'll get visibility. But if there is no response, do you recommend follow? Because I have not then followed up after radio silence after that effort. So do you recommend one follow-up or again in the effort to balance like being annoying and inundating them versus like, being bold and taking that extra mile sort of side
Yeah.
doorstep?
So, yeah, I would recommend doing at least one and then at least two follow-ups, and then you could back it off with respect to time. But there's all kinds of like tools out there. So I use a tool called Mixmax, and I think it's free to get this feature. But basically, it'll show you when the person opened the email, right? It has some sort of, I don't know, pixel tracking or something. It'll show you when the person opened their email and every time they open your email. And so this is handy as a recruiter because I want to start baselining how people are interacting with my correspondence, right? Which is very telling about, yeah. It's very handy from a recruiter perspective when you start to get a candidate down a funnel and you want to close them. But how people interact with your emails, a simple tool from a candidate's perspective is Mixmax. And again, I think it's free, but it's a freemium thing. But I think with the free subscription or the free tier, it allows you to see when they open your email and how often they're opening your email. And it even shows you they're opening your email on an Android or an iPhone, and also where, like Arizona or whatever. So it's kind of telling. I would use a tool like that if you want to kind of get a sense, because if you see that they haven't opened it, you might be more apt to send them an email follow-up in a few days, right? But if you see that they've opened it several times, give them a little breather, right? So you can kind of use that information to kind of sort of drip them accordingly. Okay, well, I'll take one more question here. Let's see, kind of lost track of where I am. How about I think about cover letters. Heard conflicting views about recruiters. Oh, by the way, just a quick show of hands. Just raise your hand. Who here is from the NSA? Never Search Alone? Okay. Okay, pretty much most folks. Okay. Always curious. So as far as cover letters, so I'll just speak from my own experience. I don't read them. And the reason why is because I've been conditioned not to read them because they're just super generic, right? And if they're super generic, it doesn't really tell me too much. And a lot of times they're just not written well, right? And so I've been conditioned not to read them. And I think a lot of folks like hiring managers and other recruiters have been conditioned not to read them because they don't really find value in them. I definitely wouldn't spend your time creating a cover letter if it's not required or asked of you as part of the application process. I mean, to do something when if they say don't submit a cover letter and you submit a cover letter, I suggested doing things that other people aren't doing to kind of stand out. But in that situation, you're just not following the guidance that's being asked, and so chances are it's going to hurt you. It's a high probability that's going to hurt you versus helping you, especially if it's a sort of a lame, generic cover letter. So, yeah, there's other areas that you can. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, I just said thanks. I had talked to a recruiter friend. They basically said don't do it.
Yeah.
They said don't worry unless the job specifically says write a cover letter.
Yeah.
So they just said people are never going to read it. So I kind of wanted to just double confirm that.
Yeah. Hopefully that's validating. Again, I'm just one person, but that's sort of my take on it. There's other areas where you can spend customizing your application. I would suggest that's in the resume in that top section that we were talking about, right? The objective section. And then, putting your time into like some of the networking, right? So, all right. Does anybody have any other questions? I'd probably wrap up here and we can resume next week.
I do. I left it on the chat, Eric.
Oh, you did? Okay. Oh, yeah. So, Archana, you probably joined after I posted this up. Okay, I'll answer this one last question here. So, how often does the recruiter look at the LinkedIn profile of the candidate to decide to proceed or not, other than looking at the ATS system to evaluate that? So, I mean, obviously, I can't speak for all recruiters, but I can speak for myself. More often than not, when I look at a resume, very quickly, I'll go to the LinkedIn profile. And the LinkedIn profile for me, I'm just sort of looking to get a sort of a broader picture of the person. What's nice about a LinkedIn profile is that it's pretty standard. So I know where to look for information that I'm looking for. A lot of times resumes there's a lot of variability in how it's formatted and how the font size and the different fonts and blah, blah, blah. So if I want to get a quick take on someone, I'll usually go to their LinkedIn profile because I know where to look for what I need, right?
So are you evaluating there whether the person is active, collaborating with others on LinkedIn or, being as a leader? What are you looking exactly?
Yeah. So before I go there, I'll start with the resume, right? When I'm looking at a resume, what I'm looking for is, where the person is, if that's important. I'll look for, like I said, I'll look for that top section, right? If they have any marquee accomplishments, sort of illustrated, or if they're describing what they're looking for, I want to make sure that aligns with what I'm looking for the role, right? If I don't see those marquee accomplishments, then I have to dig deep and scan through the rest of the resume and pluck out accomplishments that I think that align with the needs of the role. So that's kind of what I look for. In the resume, I look for title progression. right? I want to see that the person has sort of a career trajectory that's fairly consistent. And not that I would hold that against them if they didn't, but it would prompt questions on my part, right? I look for tenure, right? How long have they been at whatever companies? Obviously it's a yellow flag if the person's been jumping around every 6 months for the past 5 years, right? It's going to raise a lot of questions. Now, if you're a contractor, I would put contractor in each of those positions so that at least it partially answers or explains why the tenures were so short, right? And one thing that I would recommend on a resume is if you can get out ahead of the obvious questions, at least a little bit, I think that will help because that's what I look for, right? If I see a break, then my question is, okay, well, what's the nature of that break? But if there's nothing on there that alludes to explaining that, then I'll be more likely to disqualify than to be like, oh, okay, that kind of explains it. Now I have more questions and I want to talk to this person. If that makes any sense. So what I look for in the resume in LinkedIn is similar to what I look for in the resume. But what I'm looking for in LinkedIn is just, to your point, Archana, is like, to what extent, like, how are they interacting with the community? Are they creating content? What are they writing about? Are they a thought leader? The way I think about a LinkedIn profile is that it's more of a holistic picture of the person, whereas the resume is sort of more of a targeted, almost like a targeted pitch for a particular position, right? So when I think about, so that's what I look for as I go to LinkedIn. It's like, I want to get a bit of more of a holistic picture of this person. Does that make sense, or does that help?
It does. I have
Okay.
one more follow-up question. So in the
Yeah.
resume, if you have had a gap of say like 6-7 months, in LinkedIn you would say you've taken like a parental break or whatever break you mentioned that. Should you put that even on your resume?
That you're sort of taking a break, or that there's something explaining the gap.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen a lot of people do that, and I would recommend doing that. In fact, there was a time, I think either maybe during COVID or after COVID, where LinkedIn did this thing where they had kind of like a placeholder for when someone was between jobs or sabbatical or unemployed. It's a nice placeholder where you can kind of, it's kind of showcase maybe what you're working on or what you're doing. And it just adds a little bit more continuity because it will come up. It's something that a recruiter, wants to explore, right? If you're taking a break for whatever reason, sabbatical, family reasons, health reasons, whatever, recruiters like to see continuity, so they can kind of understand. And so part of it is like, okay, well, the question is like, what did you do during that time? And to the extent that you can showcase that you're doing something meaningful, whatever meaningful means for you, to the extent that you can show that you're showcasing that you're spending your time productively. And when I mean productively, it doesn't have to be like, you're working a job and you're making money, right? It just showing that, telling a story where you're doing something productive with that time, for me, that's meaningful, right? But if the person is just, if they're doing nothing, and that's how they explain it, like, I did nothing, then, it makes you question, like, okay, well, how good is this, how effective is this person at sort of making good use of their time? And so and not to say that doing nothing is not a good use of your time. Like, maybe it's just a mental health reason, but you have to explain it as such, right? So,
Yeah.
So hopefully that helps.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I appreciate you guys doing this survey or poll for me. I appreciate that, and thanks for sticking with me here. I'll do this every week until nobody shows up, I guess. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for your guys' participation here, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks so much.
Super useful. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you, guys. Have a good week. We'll talk to you soon.
Ciao.